We welcome our session with Matthew, where we'll discuss a very real problems to prevent in our society today, that's bullying. We'll commence the discussion shortly, so if there's any question, you can just come in anytime to raise your concerns or share your thoughts or views, or perhaps you can even share experiences with us in this discussion today. All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today and taking time off your busy schedule with us today. On topic of bullying, we are well aware that it's an ongoing, albeit a silent problem faced by children and youth all over the world. In fact, bullying can transcend all levels, regardless of age, race, work, or cultural differences. Matthew will share with you his personal experience on being bullied and also how he has managed to somehow get through this rough period in his time where we feel that there are so many kids out there and even some adults who are being bullied and have been victims of bullies, yet choose not to speak up due to various reasons. The society still remains quite reluctant to touch on issues such as mental health, disabilities, disorders, and bullying, even at this day and age, because these things may perceive to be the inability to manage one's life and assume control over our own personal health and well-being. We hope that by spreading awareness, no matter how small, on these issues, more people will know how to deal with bullying, either as a victim or to provide support to those who are subject to it. We are pleased to have Matthew here with us today to provide some insights on how he felt, what he did, and how his experience has motivated him to help those who may be facing the same predicament now. We'll pass over to Matthew.
Thank you, Gabriel. Before I commence, can I check if you all can hear me? Is it clear so far? Maybe a thumbs up would be good. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Thanks. So, thanks for joining us this afternoon and taking time off your busy schedule working. I know it's not easy. So thank you for joining us today. So before we commence, just want to give you a structure and overview of what we're going to have this afternoon as we discuss. I'll be sharing some of my experiences with regard to being a victim of bullying as a student, and also my experiences dealing with students who have been bullied as a teacher, as I've been a teacher for quite a number of years. And then subsequently, we'll end it off with recommended strategies that I have developed during this entire period of time and how they can be used to mitigate and help people, individuals who are suffering the effects of bullying. So I shall begin with the first component. I shall start at the very beginning. Before I actually enrolled into primary school, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Singapore education system. I grew up in a time in the 1980s and 1990s. Prior to my being delivered in the hospital, my mother was in labor. And before she delivered me, it so happened that she was in a near fatal incident where her blood pressure plummeted and she nearly perished along with me. I was in the womb at the same time before I was delivered. So during that period of time while she was in shock, there was severe oxygen deprivation, and that could have affected my neurological development. Of course, when I was delivered, it was not obvious yet. It seemed as if I was normal, appearance-wise. It only became very apparent that something was amiss when I began to learn how to read and write at a very young age. And so my parents realized I was very slow in which areas? Well, firstly, of course, in reading and writing. I think it was compounded by the fact I'm left-handed. So I could not seem to hold my pen very well. So my mother had to hold my left hand and the pen and go through every letter of the alphabet with me. You can see how painstaking that was. And not to mention even things like tying of shoelaces. Most people would take maybe a few days. I'll take about a few months. And after learning the whole procedure, I will forget and I have to revise it all over again. So to cut long story short, that was my pre-primary school time, and it was very difficult for my parents to see me through the basic skills. I just thought I was slow. My parents just thought I was slow. I needed more time. But I went to primary school. I guess my parents could not be there to shelter me all the way. So that's where I was inducted into the full scale of social interaction and bullying. So what were the various forms of bullying I experienced in primary school? Well, as you know, children and adults all can be equally savage in treating people who are different or who are perceived as weaker. And I was definitely perceived as weaker in terms of academics, as well as in the physical education, which involved coordination and sports. So I will just tell you the conditions that I was diagnosed with very much later on. But before the diagnosis, I had no idea those were medical conditions that I suffered from. It only became apparent later on, but I just knew I was slow. So just to give you a short introduction of the two conditions I suffer from, invisible learning disabilities, they fall under the spectrum of what we know as dyslexia. Dyslexia, I'm sure many of you are aware, is a disability that's invisible, but has to do with reading and writing. Most of the time, it's to do with reading and writing. And I think most of you may be aware also our late minister mentor, Lee Kuan Yew, had mild dyslexia. But that didn't deter him from doing very well, as the history annals have shown. But for my condition, it's not to do with reading and writing. There are two subsets under the spectrum of dyslexia. The first one is called dyspraxia. Maybe I'll spell it out, Dyspraxia, dyspraxia. And that's going to do with motor movements, coordination. For example, if you ask me to turn left, I might get confused and turn the other direction. Or I may have some problems with spatial reasoning and spatial awareness. And of course, that will mean when it comes to physical education, sports, and so on, I'll be quite a handful, or like a bull in a china shop. So that's dyspraxia. The second condition I had was called dyscalculia, Dyscalculia, dyscalculia. And as you can guess from the word calculia, right, the phrase calculia, or you can really probably guess which subjects I struggle immensely in, namely mathematics, of course, which required calculation, mental sums, and science, which involve conceptual understanding. So this condition only became diagnosed or apparent much later, but the fact I was so different and could not fit in caused me to be a victim of much bullying in primary school. So let me just tell you what kind of bullying I endured. The first is physical. Physical is the most obvious, the most visual, and the most conspicuous. So I'll just give you one example where there was this bully in class. He took out his pencil. At the point of time, there was no mechanical pencil. I think it was the 2B pencil. And he took it and stabbed me in the arm with it. I think I still have the scar with me today. My arm is embedded in my flesh. And that, of course, was a great shock to both me and the bully. I don't think he thought it would be so serious as that. So that's one example of physical abuse. And it's not just being stabbed. You can be beaten up in the midst of games when you're playing during recess or playing after school. You can always be a random victim of a group of people who feel like they need to pick on somebody else. So the first is physical. The second is to do with emotional and social. I will combine these two together. That's because kids need acceptance, right? You don't have a sense of belonging, and you can't seem to be accepted in a clique. I think kids feel it the most because that's their first exposure to isolation and alienation. And that was my baptism of fire, so to speak, where I really felt isolated and lonely, and I couldn't fit in much with the various cool cliques in class. I was often the odd one out, and that was an experience that greatly affected my emotional well-being and psychological well-being as well. That was the second kind of bullying is isolation, ostracism, and that affects your entire emotional and psychological well-being. Now, the third will be, I think, the fact that there is what we call name calling or labeling. I think labels are things that we struggle with in life on a daily basis. So I suppose at that point of time in Singapore, the emphasis was a lot on achievement academically and in other areas. So if one was not able to achieve these various levels of achievement, then one has not attained the criteria of success. So I had to deal with the label of not being successful, not being able to meet the mark, or not able to fulfill what we know as KPIs, right? Non-performance indicators, right? So I basically struggled with all these three levels or three aspects of bullying in primary school. So before I proceed on to the next stage, right, which is what happened and transpired after primary school, let me end off by saying that the most traumatic year in my primary school was, of course, primary 6. And I think most of you may also realize why. That will be the year of our PSLE, the primary school leaving examinations. Of course, the fixation was to get 4 A stars, which was the epitome or the supreme level of achievement for academic performance, right? So it was very difficult for me to even envision coming close to those kind of results as I was failing my tests, even though I tried my best. But I guess at that point of time, moral effort and the process didn't seem that important compared to the final outcome. And so I guess the process of trying one's best was not noticed or validated. And the only lifeline I had at that point of time was that I had a very trusting relationship with my parents. So I would definitely relate to them on a daily basis, the emotions, the struggles I was going through. And that was quite unique because when I check my peers, most of them don't talk to their parents in that manner. And the fact that I had the freedom and the liberty to share my parents was quite unusual. It came to a point where I even shared with them things where I did wrong. Like, for example, if I stole something, if I told a lie, or if I did something that was against my conscience, I would have the freedom to admit to them because they always emphasize the importance of moral effort, the character, and the heart, which to me at that point of time didn't make sense because having a good character and being honest and earnest will not make your life very much better in terms of how people treat you or how you are viewed. But I guess the constant reinforcement and the modeling of my parents helped me to persevere. And it culminated finally in primary 6 where my final PSLE results were far better than anyone expected, especially for me. And I was very, very surprised, pleasantly surprised, of course. And I could see the looks of shock and amazement from both my teachers and my peers. And I guess once again, I began to realize that the fact I could survive this very difficult time was due to the moral anchor and core which my family provided as a compass for me during this period of time. So before I continue, I'd like to ask, does any one of you have any experience to share about yourself, about children going through primary school, which is one of the most formative stages of the child's development, or you wish to interact and clarify any points that I shared? Please have the freedom to do so now. You could unmute yourself and then we could have a sharing session. So please, by all means. Anyone? Amy, you there?
I think why not? I'll just get the ball rolling first. So basically, I think when it comes to say experience in bullying, I do actually face in primary school because I was also introverted. I was also I would say like a very quiet. And in the end, I also get like a fair share of bullying as well. So I to me it feels that bullying is actually part and parcel of schooling life in primary school. And also an afterthought is basically in a sense that children, they tend to be immature. So they do feel that, like if let's say if they're able to actually bully or to actually impose on other people, it would feel that they have the power to actually do so, or it empowers them to do so. So I would thought is that like kids, because they're still children, they don't have that maturity to think deeper. That is why they feel that this could be one of the reasons why they want to go in to actually bully other classmates who are perceived as weaker than themselves.
Thanks for sharing, Gabriel. So anyone else wants to share with us as well? Don't be shy. There is no judgment involved. We're just sharing for among ourselves to help one another in this area of bullying and how to counter this trend.
And also to add on, perhaps let's say if you're a parent and if you have some concerns, you like to ask questions, go ahead, because this floor is open to everyone right
now. Okay, yeah, since you asked for me, I'm Amy. Thanks, Matthew, for spotting. Okay, yeah, I mean, I was a teacher before, and then of course bullying is actually quite common. I mean, if you were to ask us to raise hands, I'm not sure whose hands will be down to say that they have not been bullied in schools before. in one way or another, I think this happens. And I'm not sure whether you call it the innate human nature or kids learn it from somewhere. And so this behavior is brought into the school. Okay, but perhaps someone outside is stronger, they got it, they learn it, and it becomes power. And therefore, they do it to the smaller ones, the weaker ones, the younger ones, whoever the victims look like comfortable enough for them, and they win in this bully. But what I hear from Matthew that is more encouraging is, or the most encouraging part is, he has a shelter, and that is home. And having this support somehow sometimes could be lacking. Children may not know who to run to, who they can trust, because I find that they are being bullied sometimes also because they trust the person enough to get close. Of course, there are situations where they are being cornered by the bigger ones, being put luck somewhere. But there could be situations where, because they trust the person enough, and therefore they become a convenient victim. So this is one area where I'm not sure whether parents struggle in teaching the younger kids who they can trust. And secondly, because Matthew, he has the family background, what happens if the kid doesn't have enough of these resources where someone could help to build him up? Then perhaps in a school setting, how can a teacher help? Or how can an auntie, moms can be busy, perhaps auntie has more time, or grandparents have more time. How can their roles come in to build the child up? So those would probably be my questions. What the rules?
Summarize and paraphrase so to see if I got you correctly, Amy. It's okay.
Sure.
So you shared about how the children could be exposed to various kinds of influences from different sources, and that influences their behavior, and that could cause them to be bullies, maybe without even knowing it. Then the second point you raised, I think, was with regard to the fact that if there is no haven, like for my case, the family, what is the available avenue for them to be able to find a refuge, so to speak? Did I get it correct?
Both ways. Perhaps I said, how to get the child to understand who they can trust. At least they can protect themselves when being pulled out. And the second thing is, how can we as adults support a kid who is being bullied? And also, I guess the physical scars are quite obvious. They can just run to the teacher, he hit me, and then that few tears will win your sympathy and empathy, whatever. But the emotional scars usually last longer, and sometimes even goes into a lifetime.
Very good.
So these are the things that I'm looking at, like building the child up when they fall. In this case, the emotional scars are not obvious. How do we pick them up?
Okay. Maybe I should just respond to that very briefly, how to pick them up. So in the cases where, I'm speaking from the perspective of a person who has been a teacher like Amy as well. I've been teaching close about 15 years or so. And I've taught students from different levels, all the way from primary school to secondary and even JC and pre-varsity. So what I notice is with regard to students who don't have the freedom to share with their family, and that seems to be the norm increasingly nowadays, where we have children who have access to the latest devices, technology, phones, iPads, but they don't communicate much with their parents. And the default group of people they often share their roles with are their peers, who may not be the best sources of help because they are similarly inexperienced and not so mature. So I guess it's not a very easy question to answer, but if the parents are not able to play that role, the teachers can only play a surrogate role to a certain extent. They can never supplant the parents' position, which is primary and very dominant. But in a case where that is not available, I would say in today's context now, I'm quite aware that every school has a counseling team, and every school also has what we know as allied educators, which were not available during my time. And that is a possibility still for students to confidentially ask for help from these various sources. I'm quite certain, because I have quite a number of allied educators who are friends. And when I developed a movie based on my life story, I went to schools to share, and I was invited by allied educators. They told me that there are a rising number of cases of students who confidentially ask for help. And now with the avenue of email, where it can be confidential, students do not really fear the stigma of friends say, oh, this person went to see a counselor, something must be wrong with his head, there's something wrong with him mentally. So the anonymity there, right, can help the students to realize there's nothing wrong in sharing with somebody. The counselor can be a friend that I never had, or someone as a listening ear I never experienced or enjoyed at home. So I think the avenues of help in schools now are much more available than before. But the teacher also plays an intermediate role, right? So the form teachers also must be trained in recognizing students who show symptoms of being victimized and bullied. And it is the astuteness of the teachers in noticing behavioral changes of the students and any kinds of trauma-induced behavior. Then they are in a position to also work together with the counselors to mitigate and intervene for students like these. So I would say today's situation is there are pros and cons, right? There's a double-edged sword. On one hand, families may become more distant because both parents are working. Sometimes they're so tired they don't have time to observe their kids or talk to their kids. But in school, that's where the avenues of help can function as intermediate intervention agents or platforms that can't supplant the parent's role, but still can provide a way to prevent things from escalating and going to a far more serious state. So I would say that's the most immediate approach and stage for students today in Singapore's context, whether it's primary, secondary, or pre-varsity. Those are the cases there. And if the allied counselors can't handle it or the allied doctors cannot handle it, they can escalate to people who are more competent and equipped to handle it. And that's where they get the parents involved in the process as well. So the whole team effort where everybody's mobilized and yet with the satisfaction of confidentiality and keeping discreet about it, I think this will definitely help both students and parents to feel assured that there's nothing wrong to raise up all these problems and to seek help when needed. Have I addressed the concern, Amy?
Thank you. I think the holistic approach is important. Like whether the kid is back home and he has a meltdown, he needs the support, or back in school, there is some sense of security. So rather than being fearful and not coming to school, that is already like too much, so I think allowing the kid to know where they can run to, I think is probably very important information for them to have.
Yeah, to know that as a way out, there's someone who can help them. It really means a lot. Makes a tremendous difference.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay. All right. Just to also add on, we have a message from Grace. Okay, I'll read out the response. Sorry, it's not convenient for me to speak, so I'm sharing via chat. My son is also diagnosed with dyspraxia, amongst other conditions, and had received bullying during primary school. And the school had been quite dismissive to the situations. But like Matthew, he somehow have managed to get through and did more than satisfactory in his PSLE and gone on to secondary school. It was an achievement. Matthew, would you like to elaborate on this?
Sure. First of all, Grace, thanks for sharing that. I'm not the only person who struggles with conditions and who overcomes various odds. So I'd like to also congratulate you, both you and your son, for going through this very harrowing situation. Perhaps to respond to your situation, I'm not sure if I could clarify because it's not convenient to share verbally, but I'm just wondering why the school was dismissive to the situation shared. Because the schools nowadays have to give written accounts where cases are officially declared. So if they are dismissive, there is a case to raise it up to MOE to let MOE know that some people have fallen under the cracks. And if this could happen to your child, it could happen to any other child as well. So for the good of the collective, it may be good to raise up to those who are in a position to do something about this. But let me get on to the part about the secondary of a primary school PSLE and all that. I can only guess, based on inference from this comment that you have written, that your child must have experienced physical bullying, the 3 forms of bullying that I described just now. So I guess the fact that he did quite well, I can only infer that you must have been there for him, Grace, and you must have supported him through this very tough time. For him to be able to do so much better for PSLE, it's a team effort. So I definitely think that you are fulfilling the first criteria of being there for the child and being part of their lives at a very formative stage. And I wish to also encourage you to keep doing so, because when you go on to secondary school and beyond, the forms of bullying become more subtle. Yeah. And they're not so obvious as just obvious physical bullying. Yeah. So that will be when a child reaches adolescence, which I will share later, it'll be much harder for them to share certain things to parents. especially when they're more self-conscious about their identity and pride. So that's why from the young age, they need to have that common communication channel first. And then from there, when they reach secondary school, right, even though they may be more closed up, there is still an avenue of finding out what's going on. Yeah. And especially if the child goes to a single gender school, that's where it could get a bit more complicated, which I will share more about later. But when you, let me see, yes, yeah. Okay. So basically, I'd just like to encourage Grace, right? If your son has already gone to secondary school, I'm not sure which stage he is in right now, please inform the teachers and the various people in management about the situation so that they are aware and they cannot claim ignorance. And so they can give extra help and time as well. For kids who have dyslexia or any forms of disabilities, once they declare their conditions, unlike during my time, there are special provisions for them. They can have extra time for examinations. They can also have access to various devices that could help them in the midst of taking the examination. So all these things can make quite a difference. So have no fear in actually declaring these conditions, because the child needs all the support and help he or she can get. So that was my response to Grace. Hopefully, Grace, that answers your query.
Okay, Matthew, I just said Grace also shared that it was some time ago when his child was in primary school and he has now completed secondary school.
Wow,
Just share everyone. Yeah.
Right, thanks, Grace.
Okay. Now, Hui Ping has also dropped on the chat here. I'll just read out what she wrote. Research have also shown that primary school children are more likely to seek help from parents and teachers, whereas secondary school students will not turn to a trusted adult. The older children are more likely to speak to their peers. As such, as parents, we need to be mindful of this as well. Thank you, Hui Ping, for sharing on that. So, Matthew, what would you like to touch on regards to what Hui Ping shared?
Yeah, thank you, Hui Ping. I think what you shared is a universal concern for all teenagers in the world, not just Singaporeans. And I suppose for Singapore students, especially where they spend most of their waking hours in school, approval and validation from peers are very important for their self-identity, but also because they may be also reaching a certain stage where certain matters of maturity, where they start discovering more about themselves, may be a bit embarrassing to share with parents. I think the most important thing is that my parents did was that even when I reached secondary school, I was more self-conscious. They made a point to be very candid with me in sharing their own struggles as well. And in areas where they failed in parenting, they were quite candid in sharing with me also that, oh, mommy and daddy have failed in this. We're sorry about that. So they gave me a very safe sense of transparency and security, where even when mistakes are made, there's a chance to get back and a chance to even have acknowledgement and acceptance from the family in spite of that, as long as there is transparency and honesty. So because of that, even though I had some friends who I did confide in school, but not so many because of bullying, I still had the avenue and the assurance that I would not be condemned if I went to share with my parents. And because of the fact that I didn't have that many friends in school also, so my parents also were still the more default avenue of help. And since my parents also were transparent and not judgmental, of course, if I was wrong in lying and cheating, those are moral issues, they will come down hard on me on that. But if it's a non-moral issue, got to do with ability and I tried my best, they will do their best to support me. So that will mean intervening, talking to various teachers and so on. They will do that. But they will not be nightmare parents in banging table and demanding that teachers give in to their demands. My mother was a teacher herself, so she's very conscious that teachers must be treated with dignity and respect. So to answer your question about this part, it's true. Most teenagers, right, are not very open to sharing. And also, you're right, girls are more likely to use relational bullying. Now with social media, they can use Facebook, Instagram. Actually, Facebook now is mostly out of fashion for the kids. It's Instagram and TikTok. So they will use those to isolate and make fun of those whom they want to bully. And for guys, of course, they will use physical. But yes, a lot of boys also use social media. And we had cases where boys would beat up their victims and take pictures and videos and put it online. And I believe some of these videos actually went viral before. And that was how their cases were exposed. So they often do all these things because they feel a sense of belonging, being to a sense of a group of bullies where everybody feels that they're doing something together. It's fun. Of course, nobody bothers to feel about the victim. So in this case here, when you mention about girls and boys, yes, there are different kinds of bullying and different ways of intervening and trying to deal with those problems. I find that for girls, as they grow older, they still can relate with parents whom they have close relationships with. It's the boys where they feel they need to feel macho. They may not want to share so much with their parents. So maybe it's a personal bias on my part, but I feel that boys, when they reach adolescence, they need more supervision and surveillance from parents and people in positions of authority. This is a generalization, but girls do mature a little faster with regard to relational maturity. Boys, on the other hand, can remain as boys for some time, and it takes a bit longer for them to mature. So yes, you need to look up, especially more for boys, because the pressure to conform physically in that aspect is strong. For girls, the pressure to conform relationally and socially is there. So there needs to be a different touch and approach for both. And for Grace,
Okay, so I'll just read out what Grace wrote there. So yes, thanks. I informed in one particular incident with an allied educator. She was extremely impatient and reprimanded him for not being able to complete tasks. So I hope what Matthew mentioned earlier about allied educators are now better trained to manage kids with special needs. And also, thank you, Stephen, for sharing your thoughts. Okay, so I'll just read out. Stephen is asking, I'm curious what kind of coping mechanisms you develop in response to the various forms of bullying. So Matthew, you want to touch on that?
Allow me to try to answer these two questions in a two-pronged approach so that I can actually centralize and focus so that you'll be able to encompass the concerns addressed. With regard to the allied educator who was impatient, I wouldn't seek to defend them. It is wrong for any educator to be impatient and to deny any person assistance, especially those who are trying their best and through conditions which they are suffering from of no choice of their own. So if this allied educator has not been helpful, there is an avenue for parents, concerned parents, to raise it up to the allied educators' management. And the allied educators themselves are mindful that now in this current climate where there are surveys and evaluation often done for all members of staff, not just teachers alone, they are mindful too that in the end, their behaviour and conduct will come back to haunt them if they have not been kind and inclusive to those who need help. So there's nothing wrong with bringing to attention various areas of improvement for allied educators. But suffice to say, many of them are very, very stressed. And my feedback after interacting with them is that they are overworked and very, very stretched. That is because there is a great demand and growing demand every year for help for children in these areas of special needs, mental health, and bullying. And they are quite overwhelmed because they are short of staff. So the demand is great, but supply is limited. And so there are very few who can help them. And being human beings themselves, I guess the stress could also get to them. And that could also affect their response and their way they respond to various people who need help and they become impatient. Well, of course, that doesn't mean it's excusable, but these could be some factors that could mitigate and also explain why the educator could not be so patient as he or she needed to be. But again, please do not hesitate to give feedback because the channels now are much more available than before. And what is shared will not just stay on one level, but can go on to other levels that will do something definitive. So I would say do not let one bad egg spoil the entire thing. There are good allied educators as well. And there are people who are also good educators who can actually counter the bad effects of those who have been negative. So I hope that answers Grace's question. With regard to Stephen's coping mechanisms, the first coping mechanism I had was mostly actually imbued from my parents, where they kept telling me whenever I said I'm useless, I'm hopeless, I might as well just end my life, there's no point in living. My parents will always keep reinforcing the same message. They said, we don't really care that you get 4 stars or get A. What matters more to us is that whether you have the correct heart and the correct character. And much as I didn't believe what they said at the point, I said, useless, you give me all this advice, how can you help me? Now the problems will disappear, right? It will still continue. I need a solution now, a quick fix. But they never gave in to the temptation for that quick fix, I mean, there were measures that could be taken to alleviate my problems, yes, but they never compromised on principle and moral stance. And that was this anchor I was talking about. That was the coping mechanism. My primary coping mechanism was to affirm what I knew was right and what my parents knew was right and approved. And that helped me to counter all those negative thoughts and persevere in the midst of bullying, misunderstandings by teachers. And that helped me to have that resilience needed to press on. Because circumstances can keep changing. People's approval can also keep fluctuating. If we're going to live our lives based on that alone, then we're going to be very, very tossed and turned easily by every wind of circumstance. So my parents imbued in me this sense of having something steady to keep me anchored and centered. So I mentioned just now I had this movie, Unbroken, and the movie was based on this analogy and metaphor of a 不倒翁 in Mandarin. It's called 不倒翁. In English, I believe it's called a roly-poly toy. And I'm not sure if children today are playing with this toy because it's very old-fashioned and old school. When you knock the toy down, it comes back to the center again because there's something in the center, like some metal or some substance that causes it to come back to its center of gravity, which we call CG for short. And I believe that CG is a primary focal point, what most children need to get them through difficulties like this. Because without that focal point in which you can go back to, you will find yourself questioning, how do you know you're of worth? How do you know you have a destination? How do you know you're approved? And if you don't have that, it can be very hard for the kid to reconcile all these things and to find a sense of worth and a sense of worth in continuing on this journey, of constantly facing all these different taunting and different difficulties. But if they know there's an end goal and that all these things are temporary and that they can be used and responded to in a way to refine your character, then the process of standing up firm and standing up to such bullying can be a continual process of growth with such affirmation of a focal point. So I think that part need to be reinforced by both parents and schools. That's my answer to Stephen. He also mentioned more invisible content.
Yeah, so basically I will also touch on, he also mentioned about bullying these days has taken a different form online, and this is more invisible compared to the normal bullying that we know of. How do we identify the telltale signs that someone has been cyberbullied? So you want to chip in, Matthew?
Sure. Well, when I was first teaching in my first school, cyberbullying was not the prevalent form of bullying yet because social media had not taken off. I believe Facebook was not even in existence then. And that probably gives you a little bit of indication as to how many years I've been teaching. But when I began to teach in my second and third school, oh yes, social media was in full swing. And one of the signs that we could tell somebody was suffering from cyberbullying is the fact that, you see, the kids also in their class have their own WhatsApp group. They have their own social media chat groups. And once they are excluded, right, it will be shown in the form of physical interaction as well in the class dynamics. So wherever they are isolated in virtually, it shows also in some ways physically. So what I noticed during my time when I was teaching in an arts class in a pre-varsity institution. And in arts class, the students there are very different from the science students. For art students, I think emotions, being more emo as they call it, was more prevalent, right? So the girls and the boys would base their worth on acceptance by the majority. But I noticed over some time, while they all were very good friends, some people began to stop talking, stop going out for lunch, stop having little games and little activities they used to have with their other friends. And then that to me was a telltale sign already. So when I began to ask them and say, hey, what's going on? Because they knew I was a friend to them and they could confide in me. And they shared. They started with cyberbullying first. And normally it could be a post taken out of context, or it could be that somebody is jealous of this girl for being so pretty and so beautiful, so she rallies her friends against that person. It's all very irrational at times. But the actions of isolation or ostracism are very, very fast. And before you know it, the student will not feel welcome, and it shows physically too in all the activities. And they will sit apart in class. They will not participate in normal conversations. All these are telltale signs already for teachers to take note of. And I do know that these students also don't share this with their parents because they told me the parents have no time to deal with such things. It's very minor issues. And so I think the parents must also reinforce with such kids as well as children. No matter is too small for them to listen to, especially when it comes to relationships. Because if you're so stunted and so traumatized at this age, how are you going to integrate into working life later on? So the parents must really give that sense of openness to say, if you have anything to share with me, I'm there for you. Even though I'm super busy, yeah, this is a priority. You are my priority. I'm there for you. And if the teacher tells that to the parent on the parents' day, when the parents come down and they have no awareness and they suddenly discover this thing, all the more the parents should really take remedial actions to do something about it to make up for lost time. Because all this to do with the normal interaction patterns in a family. I had one girl who was very smart, and she had the habit of not talking, and she had psychological issues. But she happened to have a bunch of friends in the class who were quite nice to her, so that was her buffer. But in a family context, she hardly spoke to her parents. There was something dysfunctional, and it was a case where we got to know later on that she just emails her father when they're under the same roof. They don't even talk. And later on, when the parents discovered how she's been doing in school with all these issues, they were very surprised. And sad to say, she was so close to completing her A levels, but she dropped out last minute and disappeared. At the preliminary examination, she didn't turn up. So when my colleague and I went to visit her, it was with much cajoling and with much urging before she opened the door and even talked to us. And we could not really help her because she didn't want to open the door both physically and metaphorically. And I have no idea later on whether did she take the examinations as a private candidate or did she continue to come back to school. So you can see all these relational issues, right? It affects many other areas of life. It always starts there. So once you notice telltale signs, people who know about this, who can do something about it, you should sound the alarm. It's always better to be safer than sorry, I feel. And you're right, because these are more invisible, right? You have to be careful, it's subtle. But the telltale signs can be noticed in a break of regular behavior that was noticed prior to the cyberbullying. There will be quite an obvious change of behavior. I hope that
Okay.
answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Matthew, for sharing. Okay, so now the thing is that we have discussed about, like, say, for instance, cyberbullying, coping mechanisms, and also your part on primary school. So do you want to move on to secondary school on how you cope with the bullying or truant that you experienced in secondary school?
Sure. Yes, people. So I will now go on to the secondary and pre-varsity. I will combine and collate these two together for the sake of ease of narration. So in a secondary school context, I chose to go to a all-boys school. I suppose I was also influenced by the fact that my parents felt that being an all-boys school could provide less distractions, maybe in terms of being distracted by the opposite gender. But then again, that's a matter of preference. I would not recommend that for all parents, right? For my case, being an all-boys school was an eye-opener because in a single-gender sex school, boys don't have to pretend to be gentlemen when there are no ladies around. They can be who they really are. So if they are savage, they will be savage. And savage they truly were. I was a victim of more physical bullying because at that age, in adolescence, I think people guys want to show their masculinity, right? By showing their strength. And what better way to show it than to whack somebody who is physically weaker? So yeah, I was a victim of much physical bullying. That's one. And the social ostracism I talked about in primary school became more pronounced in an all-boys school context because different schools have different criteria of success and popularity. In an all-boys school, there are two main hallmarks of success. First, academic-wise, you should do well. Secondly, you should do well also in sports. Other various pursuits like maybe the arts and maybe other pursuits like interaction club, they do not have the same amount of value as being good in both studies and good in sports. And sad to say, I was not good in either. Although I tried my best, but I was often a laughing stock in those two areas. And I suppose what made it worse was there were teachers who made it difficult by not understanding the fact I was trying my best. So there were occasions where I asked questions and I was made fun of by educators, and I had quite a negative impression of educators at the point of time. So I was really very traumatized and reticent as well as withdrawn in secondary school. I guess the only haven I had, besides my parents, of course, was the fact that I managed to join the choir quite by accident. At the point when I first joined, there was no choir. I suppose singing was not considered a very macho activity. So I wanted to join the drama club because my interest has always been in music, drama. So I joined drama club, but unfortunately there were no practice sessions. So whenever I asked the teacher, is there a practice session? She'd say, oh, we'll inform you when there's one, but unfortunately there didn't seem to be any. So when the choir auditions came on, my parents told me, why don't you just try it out? I said, are you sure? I'm a bathroom singer. I don't think I can sing. I said, no harm trying, right? You have no CCA, and as we know, kids need CCA and CCA points. So I tried an audition, and the rest was history. I was surprised the conductor liked my voice, and he appointed me as a section leader for the baritones. Baritones is a voice range between the lowest and the highest male voice, right? So that began my exposure to music, and music proved to be cathartic in some sense. It gave me some therapeutic value, helping me to express myself, to get out of my shell. I was so shy. To stand on stage, even as a group, was difficult for me. I remember those times when I'll be singing, I'll be standing sadiya, which means a stand attention position, my fist clenched, sweating away. And just standing up there itself was really an act of much courage needed, which I think boys may not know until when they're put on stage by themselves alone, then they realize how difficult it is to be on stage and not get stage fright, right? So what happened in secondary school was that my way of coping, to answer any questions that may come out of coping mechanisms, I grew much deeper in my understanding of what my parents said, because I noticed many students there who were very academically and physically endowed, but they were far from trustworthy and reliable individuals. And then I began to see a paradox, right? That people who have more knowledge and ability does not necessarily translate to having a better character and heart. But I guess because the predominant focus was on ability, sometimes character was given lip service. But there were one or two friends and teachers who were friendly and accommodating towards me, and some of them are still my friends right now. So you can see those friendships form during those formative years. With the right kind of friends, it can actually blossom and grow many years down the road. So the pattern was very similar, no? Like in primary school, I was failing all my tests. I remember for subjects like maths and science, I really was terrible. Except for science now, you have this added element called practical science practical lab sessions. So you had to do experiments with chemistry and physics, and my school had no option for arts. Everyone had to take pure sciences. And that was a recipe of disaster for me because I could not get a single experiment result right. And when we were paired up with partners, my partner would say, wow, Matthew, you're completely stupid until an idiot like that, he would say. So the words still resonate with me now. No? Careless words really cut deep. It really affects your psyche more than you could ever imagine. So it so happened that I thought, that's it, man. When I reached prelims, which I failed, I think I probably have to go out and work at McDonald's. Nothing wrong with McDonald's, it's a noble job, but I thought, well, that's it. No more studying. It's over for me. But again, the same pattern, miraculous pattern happened where I did much better for O levels, far better than anyone expected. And I like to chalk it up not just to hard work. I learned to work very hard compared to the rest. I worked doubly hard than most able-bodied individuals. But I believe also it's the fact that there was a moral and ethical dimension that helped me to have the impetus to keep pressing on doggedly, to know that my worth is not based on the results, but how I go through the process and what kind of person I turn out to be through all these hardships and adversities. And that was how actually I managed to get through secondary, and then led me to junior college. And junior college was a cultural shock because I went to a junior college by the skin of my teeth, and I was in a co-ed context with females around now. And that particular school was unique in the sense that the girls and the guys there were very different from the usual heartlands school people. They came from more, people call in Hokkien, Amor Pai, or more westernized context. And the boys would be those who have a very charming pedigree, who can speak really well, debate very well. The girls are also from a better category, but they are also full of social graces and so on. And because I came from a more heartland secondary school, I didn't quite fit into. And at that point in time, I could choose to do arts, humanities, which is what I wanted. But to my horror, I was also failing my humanities subject because I just keep writing. I was good in writing stories, but you can't write stories for general paper, history, and for economics. And at that point of time, I guess there was hardly any teaching of techniques to be used. So it was a very lonely time for me. I remember in the arts class, only about 20 of us. Arts normally have a smaller intake compared to science. I only had one good friend, and we would sit right in front, and we were arrowed to be the class monitor or class rep, as they call it, and I was arrowed to be the assistant class monitor by default because nobody else wanted the job. And the rest of the class was seated right at the back, so there'll be a chasm right between us physically that symbolize the social distance among us. So I gained a reputation of being a nice guy, gentlemanly, but not someone to be invited to parties, not the life of the party. And I suppose the only way I felt I belonged was when I was in the choir there. And I suppose it was a carryover from my days in my all boys school choir to the JC choir. And my teachers in the choir actually treated me quite nicely. And so they actually helped me to grow in my experience singing solo. I was asked to sing national anthem in front of the whole school solo without any musical accompaniment, which is a very rare practice. And that gave me my first experience in terms of facing the crowd. And I also had two good history teachers there who treated me as a person. They know I was failing, but they knew I was trying my best. And they made such an impact on me that I decided that once I graduate, if I graduate at all, I'll be a teacher and teach the same subject that they have taught me out of fact. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so just want to ask right now, in terms of say in JC, did you actually, besides what you mentioned, there is actually a gap between the rest of class and also yourself, right? Are there also any other subtle ways of bullying that you experience in JC?
Yes, I think it's a very good question, Gabriel, because at this stage of life, it's very much more subtle than in secondary school. And because there are dynamics of BGR, boy-girls relationship, it'd be even more insidious and not so obvious. So I guess the most obvious form of bullying would be exclusion. Exclusion. Because if you don't belong to a certain party clique, that's it. You are really out. You're not the cool kid on the block. You're really out of it. And when you're really out of it, it's obvious because everybody doesn't sit near to you. The physical distance shows that as well. So being in cliques and not being part of cliques is how you would define JC. And I will find that kind of bullying is a little bit more passive, not so obvious. And people would actually make slight comments about how weird these people are. So what happened was that I have a few friends, I told you, who were just like me. We were so lonely, we call ourselves Lonely Man Club. That was the irony of it. And that Lonely Man Club people is just because they were like me, they're quieter, they just kept to themselves, they tend to be hardworking, they tend to be listening more to teachers, not so cool, not party goers.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the thing that we received was more of a collective scale, where I was labeled as a nerd, a weirdo, but I was not outwardly targeted on a single individual basis. Because the fact that I was quite nice to most people and polite, so they had no real grounds to whack me, so to speak. It's more the fact that they just didn't regard me as a person who could be as a human being with emotions and feelings. I was depersonalized and dehumanized in a sense with all the labeling. So that was the kind of bullying I experienced in both the choir, with the boys who were quite harsh as well, and in my classes and in my other expertise in pre-varsity leagues.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so in this case, basically, I just summarized what you mentioned. So basically, as we progress into the higher level education, so people, when it came to bully, it's much more subtle, and they will not want to show up, right? It's just that basically use other means to manipulate emotionally, right?
More
Okay, so I just open this up to the rest of people. So you have any say discussion, or you have anything that you want to share regards to your experience being bullied, or perhaps your child, if you happen to have a child who is in secondary school or in higher secondary who is facing the same problem, or we can just open up. You can just share, or you can just chat over here, and then we can just have a discussion on that.
Especially children who are in the secondary and pre-varsity levels, if you should share, it's most helpful.
Okay, so I need to just go back to what Grace actually mentioned. Just now what she mentioned was that, right, his son was in primary school and he has now completed secondary school. So if let's say Grace could share whether what was his experience in school, it would be great. So basically, you can just have a discussion. And also, Hui Peng also mentioned earlier on that, secondary school students will not turn to a trusted adult. Because older children, they are more likely to speak to their peers. So perhaps you can want to share, did you actually, besides that 3 things, did you actually share your problems with your parents or family?
Yeah, so you asked me to respond to this question, right, Gabriel? Just clarify. Okay, yeah. So Yes, to answer very simply, I still confided in my parents a great deal. Even though I had those lonely man club people by default as friends by default, we're not that close either because some of the friends did show that they were quite selfish in keeping certain things to themselves, not protecting one another. So at the end of the day, I still know that the ones I could really trust are people at home who were always there for me. So in short, right, sometimes there are friends of convenience because of circumstances, but that's very different from having a rock and a haven that must be intentionally established from a very young age so that it does not happen overnight. When you need to happen in pre-varsity, it cannot happen overnight because at that age, they will not want to come back again and start speaking candidly anymore.
Okay, all right. So just like to ask whether if there's any points or like we'll now open this up to the floor. Do you have any opinions you'd like to share, or would you like to share your thoughts about this? We can share either on chat or you can actually unmute yourself and share with us right now.
Anyone? Feel free to share, don't worry.
Okay, so I guess basically all this question has been addressed in front. Okay, so why not, right? We can just touch on a little bit about your life. Let's say if there's anyone who has their thought, can you just chat here? We'll just meet up later on. So you can just go on with, like your short experience in NS, and also probably can also share. Okay, just now actually Stephen has mentioned about coping mechanisms. So basically, you can just share regards to what is your coping mechanism in regards to this kind of feeling. Just go ahead.
So I shall attempt to be as succinct as possible for the next stage of my life, which was in national service. Something that every guy in Singapore has to serve. It's mandatory and as well as compulsory. But during my time, national service was 2.5 years. Right now, I think it's just 2 years. So most of the guys do get a half-year discount, so to speak. However, the climate in NS the problems faced can still be similar. So I'll just share very briefly what happened to me in national service. Due to the fact that I've earned a reputation for being hardworking in secondary and primary school to get through my major milestones of O levels and PSLE, I mistakenly thought that being hardworking will also work for national service. So I trained very hard physically. So in terms of running 2.4 km, doing sit-ups, shuttle run, doing chin-ups, no problem. I was able to work my way from being obese and overweight to slimming down to being very fit. So I worked very, very hard on those areas, thinking that will see me through NS and it'll be a breeze. But I was so wrong because NS required much more than just physical coordination or physical fitness. So to my horror, when I went there already the first week, I discovered I could not do the simplest of tasks. Like I shared with you just now, I struggled with tying shoelaces since young. That was because of dyspraxia. So it came out in its full scope and its full impact during national service. So these are the various activities I struggle with that most people could cope with. For example, you have to learn to strip your rifle. And your rifle is your default wife in national service. You can't afford to lose your wife. If you lose your wife, it is a chargeable offense. So you first have to learn how to strip the rifle, and you have to do it under a time limit. So needless to say, I could not do it. I tried observing, asking for help, but everybody's response was, "Hey man, we're too busy trying to save our own lives. We can't even help you, so just manage it yourself." And of course, when I could not finish it on time, the rest of the platoon all will get the punishment. It's a collective thing. And there is no room or little room for actually having empathy for those who are trying their best but may have problems that are not diagnosed yet. So stripping rifle, one activity. Second, shooting, right? It's a must for you to pass your shooting. You need to hit a certain number of targets to get through. And needless to say, I was labeled as a bobo shooter. Bobo shooter for short term for a person who can never hit any target. And so going to range was a nightmare for me. Marching, of course, right? You need to be a good soldier in listening to orders and marching with precision. But since I had dyspraxia, I could not coordinate my left, right, forward, back movements, and I always stuck up like a sore thumb. And of course, the sergeants will be pressured by the inject will be pressured by the OC. So it's a very cumulative top-down pressure. and the ones at the bottom of course get the most of it. And I suppose what made it so difficult was most of my platoon mates found it very difficult to accept me. We were called by surnames in national service, and my surname Quack was synonymous with a dirty word. And so I felt I brought my family surname great dishonor. And there was another person called Quack there also. So wherever people say Quack, and then they spell out an expletive, the other guy would say, "Hey, please don't insult the word Quack. I'm a very different Quack from this Quack. This Quack is useless. I'm a good Quack." So I really felt, wow, I'm a disgrace to my family. I was so down. It was my lowest point in my life ever. And I think the only saving grace and the only so-called encouragement I had was that there were people who were friendly to me because they were also considered outcasts in society, I guess. They came from the lower strata of society where they were school dropouts. Some of them didn't finish their PSLE. Some of them were loan sharks. Some of them were gangsters. Of course, being involved in all this is not healthy or right. But the fact that they will test you first to see if you're willing to help them or treat them as a person. And when they saw that I was treating them with respect, they began to befriend me. And sometimes when the bullying was out of hand, because I experienced things like blanket party. I'm not sure you know what blanket party is. It's not where they throw a blanket over you and you go for a party. They throw a blanket over you at night, they start beating you up, and when you open the blanket later after the beating, you have no idea who actually orchestrated the entire attack. That's blanket party.
Okay.
So other than that, my clothing was stolen. Whatever I put out to dry will be stolen the next day. I have to buy new things all over again. Even the 11B, which is the green IC we exchanged after we entered the army, our pink IC is taken away. We have a green IC. It was stolen. And we could not find it until the very last moment when we discovered it was about to be emptied to the main bin. And if we lose that, it's a chargeable offense. You could go to the detention barracks for losing your 11B. So it was a very difficult time where I do not know who to trust. Could I trust my platoon mates? Could I trust my superiors? My superiors also didn't seem very understanding. So I guess the only haven for me at that point in time, because my parents were not able to help me. They were so far away. They were so concerned. They were so concerned I'll do something foolish. It was the fact that there were people who protected me. And what better way than those people who are so street smart and been working for all their lives, and they know people have been looking down on them, and they feel for the underdogs. So because I showed them respect and they could see I was a person who could be trusted, they protected me. So yeah, they did label me worse than the term Sabo King. There are far worse terms that I don't think I should share. And
Okay. Yeah. So basically your experience is that you got so-called like sabot lah, so sabot, and then they invited you to a blanket party, right?
they didn't find me,
Okay.
I was inducted. Yeah.
Mhm. I see. Okay. Anyway, Grace shared something about her son. So this is what she wrote. During his secondary school days, it was a different situation as by then he was diagnosed with astrocytoma, a form of brain tumor. I must say that although bullying is no longer much of an issue and the school has been supportive, however, the issue being teenagers and being in an all-boys school, they seem to have their own things and get on with their own life. So my son felt left out and hurt. And due to his condition, his mobility has suffered greatly. So any physical activities are not possible for him. And currently, only one of his classmates is in touch with him. More online than physical contact, as he does not go out unless I am with him. Thank you so much for sharing, Grace. So, Matthew, would you like to just elaborate on what Grace has shared with everyone?
Grace, I'd like to thank you for being so candid in sharing that. It's definitely not easy. And I'm not sure what stage the brain tumor is right now. I can only pray and hope that it's controllable and that it's receiving medical treatment and is within treatment at the moment. To be able to answer this part about being left out, I can definitely empathize. And I would say it's good, even at this point of time, to help the child to also have realistic expectations. While we do know that most people ought to be more inclusive, they ought to be more understanding, they ought to reach out to people who are outcasts, the harsh reality of life is that people just go for the easier option. It's easier to go with cliques. It's easier to conform to be accepted. It's easier not to reach out to people who are not so popular. And it takes a lot of moral effort to get out of that default mode. So it's a possibility that your son may have fewer so-called friends throughout his life, but he may discover friends who are in contact with him who are quality friends, friends who stay on a much longer time and are there with you through thick and thin, right? So I think what's important at this point of time is that whoever is who's contacting your son right now, the parents also should definitely welcome that friend, be very nice to the friend, welcome him, and affirm the friendship. And that will definitely encourage your son in the sense that friendships are not based on quantity, but it's based on quality. Many of these so-called friends, you'll probably lose touch with them anyway when they go to different seasons of life. And there's no guarantee you will come in contact with them. And even if you do, many of these relationships may be transactional, where they befriend you because it's beneficial to them. So what happened was because I went through all these experiences, I saw the ugly side of human nature. It helped me to be more astute, be more streetwise, and also be more realistic. I couldn't expect the world to conform to my expectations, which I still struggle with. I'm still a work in progress. But when I know that these are the realities, I just concentrate on what needs to be valued and what I do have, and I concentrate on nurturing what I do have. So I go for quality. And the quality is what actually constitutes longevity. Just like marriage, right? When you grow together through thick and through thin, it's quality, it's commitment. So when your son begins to reorientate his level of worth and acceptance based on quality, it wouldn't bother him so much whether he has many friends or not. He'll be looking out for people who have similar convictions, similar wavelengths, similar values, and then he will concentrate on developing those relationships that are worth developing. So I will encourage Grace to encourage your son in that direction. The more you're able to do that, you won't be so affected by the so-called number of friends that can come and go as and when they please. I hope that answers Grace's question.
Okay, thank you so much, Matthew. Okay, just to add on, Grace also mentioned this. She elaborated. It is a lifelong management as the tumors are not aggressive. He is receiving medical attention, but nothing much can be done, unfortunately. And she also totally agreed what you said. She said, I do try to encourage him, as you have mentioned, and have advised him like what you have said. Thank you so much for that, Grace, and thank you for Matthew for sharing. Okay, next comment from Amy. Amy said, I can hear that having a trusted adult or friend is very important in life to cruise through hardships, to be the ear and the voice when our words cannot express the pain we go through. When one is bullied, the victim has lost his voice. Would you like to just elaborate on what Amy shared on the chat?
Thank you, Amy, for sharing that. I agree with you totally that you appear to be voiceless and helpless, especially when you don't have that trusted person and there is no way you can get yourself heard. So once again, I reiterate the supreme importance of family being the basic structure and haven. But in the event that is not possible, then the structures in school, the child must be aware of the available avenues of help. And children are intuitive enough to gravitate towards those who do not dismiss them and who are able to listen to them. And the students, if they find that in school, is a blessing, of course. But perhaps I give my experience also. I didn't have a real trusted friend, so to speak, when I was in the Lonely Man Club that I was a chairman of because I developed it. And that actually helped me in leadership qualities as well in a very twisted way. I had a good friend, but at that point of time, he was not what we consider a very stable or good friend because we just knew that we were lonely. We were drawn together by similar circumstances. But as to sharing and confiding in each other, we were both in the process of maturing. And what happened was that for me, because I realized that he himself was in pain, being lonely and being rejected, I became his default best friend because I was a listening ear. But that doesn't mean that I could confide with everybody my own problems as well. I could confide with my parents, but not with everybody in the Lonely Man Club. It was only after many years, after that friendship was first forged, where I continued to hang on to the friendship and develop it and continue to be there for the friend. And our friendship began to blossom and develop. And he became my best friend, right? After many years of going through different cycles of life and different situations. And when you are there for them, they begin to see that, things like popularity, acceptance, after some time, they don't really have that kind of earlier and attractiveness anymore. They're looking for stability. They're looking for people who can commit, people who are there for them and trustworthy. So in that sense, through perseverance and by keeping the same principles and conviction, I guess people were able to see also that you can be trusted and they will also gravitate to people who can be good friends and trustworthy as well. But of course, that doesn't mean you can expect everyone to be trustworthy. There are times we can do our best, reach out, be empathetic, be inclusive, but not everybody will respond in the same way as well. So we must also temper our expectations and don't be caught entirely by surprise if there are betrayals or there are difficulties in relationships. It's part and parcel of life. But never let those things cause you to deviate from your center of gravity, which I mentioned just now. So in that sense, that voice will never be quelled, because that voice that speaks through your life, where you are alone and there's no one standing with you, it seems, and you still persevere, that voice may seem soft, but man, it resonates down the ages and through time. You have no idea how it can affect people. So you are never rendered voiceless in that sense. The way you live, the way you conduct, the way you respond to bullying and behavior, that kind of voice speaks volumes.
I see. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Jerry. And I now go back to what Stephen mentioned. Is a guy's thing. Haha, blanket party. And I'm sure the label has the Sabo King in camp. Is that true, Matthew?
Yeah, actually, I did address it briefly just now.
Uh-huh.
But I remember one particular incident where was held up from booking out after confinement for 2 weeks, which is compulsory, and I was blamed for it. And when my parents came to fetch me, I was hysterical. I just couldn't understand why I should carry on life anymore. And my parents were very taken aback also to see how affected I was, because normally at the age 17, 18, you don't break out crying. Most guys will hide their tears, right? But for me, when I was inconsolable, so every time going back to camp is like going back to prison. It's that kind of sense of dread, and just to be labeled as a troublemaker, I was hurting because I'm not creating trouble. You see, deliberately, I'm trying my best. So, well, to condense the entire story, things came to a head where I thought it was all over for me, just like PSLE, O levels and A levels. It's the same pattern where I thought, that's it, man, I'm finished. Then, through some miraculous turn of events, I was diagnosed with this condition I mentioned just now, where a private doctor officially tested me, and it became very apparent that with my conditions, the severity of it, I should not even have gone through PSLE. I should not have made it. That's how severe the conditions were. And the doctor was surprised how I made it through. And the army people at first didn't believe it, because I guess there was so many people skiving and escaping. So the suspicion that somebody is trying to escape is always there. So there are people with genuine cases that could be falling through the cracks because everybody is suspected as a slacker. So they tested me 3 or 4 times as well. And finally, when it was confirmed that I had a conditions that tallied with the private doctor's diagnosis, army was more or less over. So I didn't get to enjoy the benefits, so to speak, of having my conditions diagnosed. But through those experiences, I began to distinguish who are those who are considered real friends, who are those who are considered people whom you can trust. And I begin to see a paradox. It doesn't mean that the more intelligent and more able you are, it makes you a better person. In fact, you could be a person with plenty of skills and knowledge, but a very dangerous person. And those who are lower in strata may not always be the bad people. In fact, maybe they didn't have the opportunities in life that others had. So they never had someone they could relate to or trust and help them through. So they fell through the cracks. So I began to see good, bad. My whole entire perspective of good and bad was reframed. And it was a real eye-opener for me. I never saw people in the same light ever again. And I think the army experience was a life-defining moment that helped me to see with that extra insight, to see beyond appearances. And I think that's very important for those who are being bullied as well. Bullies are actually cowards. On the surface, they appear very, very brave because of strength in numbers and strength in acceptance. Remove that from them, report that to the teacher, report it to superiors, report it to someone who can do something to them. Their cowardice will be in full bloom and for everyone to see. And then you realize that they're not as strong as they believe to be. In fact, it may take more strength to stand alone against overwhelming odds on a consistent basis than to gang up with people and bully others and appear strong, but actually you're weak. So once the child also understands what true strength is, that is an additional buffer or a certain kind of buffer and pillar the child can use in his arsenal of weapons to counter bullying. Because perspective and values affect the way that you act, live, and respond. And that will also affect your emotional and psychological state. So perspectives must not be labeled as a pure head knowledge conceptual thing. It must be internalized as something real, something definitive, and something long term. And then when it happens, even if you're not around as a parent, the kid has enough ingrained knowledge, skills, convictions to stand up and to make a stand against such adversities, even if you're not around.
Okay, thank you so much, Matthew. Oh, and Stephen mentioned good observations, Matthew. Thank you, Stephen, for your comments. Okay, now, so we're just going into the last phase of this discussion. Okay, so basically, after you experience your life in school, from primary school all the way to JC and then to NS, so perhaps we can conclude this discussion. Okay, perhaps you can also elaborate on your thoughts and opinions on how one can actually stand up against bullying. So you mentioned earlier on that you draw strength from your family members and also some of your close friends. So perhaps you can also share your thoughts on what parents can do to support their child, and also what both children and parents can do to stand up against and protect themselves or their child with regards to the rise of online bullying. So perhaps you can just touch on that.
Sure. I always believe that as an educator, that it helps for people to have both visual and audio stimuli. So I did prepare a PowerPoint slide that encapsulates my response to this question. So I have to ask Gabriel for permission to share the screen with you. Yeah. So let me activate that now. Please let me know if you're able to see it, and if not, I have to make some adjustments on my part. Are you all able to see the first slide here, where it's about no more bullying? Please let me know, then I can carry on from there.
I can, okay, I can see the slides.
So I will assume if you are not able, please let us know so we can address.
Yeah.
So basically, after having shared all your experiences, different parts of life, national service, right? I would like to go on to the next part, which encapsulates my answer visually, as I said, which comes under intervention strategies, right? So you will notice for this one here, first of all, I think it's very important from the very get-go, at a very early stage, please be intentional in over-communicating to the children that, hey, I'm there for you. The communication channel is always open. So once the children are comfortable and safe, once they feel safe, that what they share with you, they won't be laughed at and mocked at. They will then come to you in the future for other areas of advice and struggles that they're having. Because it's not so much about a sense of condemnation. They know that if they do wrong, they'll be corrected, because they know the parents have an innate sense of right and wrong and moral compass. But they feel comfortable about even sharing their feelings with the parents, because they know the parents really love them. So even when the parents discipline them, it's out of love, see. So once you have that security blanket, so to speak, not blanket party, security blanket, this is where is the most important foundation and cornerstone throughout all stages of life, whether it's primary school or secondary or pre-varsity, right? And then, as I mentioned, be deliberate. That means you can't leave it to chance, you can't say, oh, when there's time, I'll speak to my child about this. When we have opportunity, I'll do this. When I'm not so busy, I will speak to my child more. We never know what tomorrow might bring. So while you still have time today, don't be a procrastinator. Be deliberate. Set it as a priority, you see. Because if you're not there for them in this way when they're young, it's not realistic to expect them to come to you later on in the different stages of life, much later on when the earlier stages were not properly addressed, right? So it must be a daily and consistent priority. So we often prioritize things that are important to us and make time, because in Singapore, we know we're not a city that never sleeps, right? But certain things must be done. It is a priority. The safety of our children is a priority. To ensure that they are going to school safely and coming back safely is a priority. Elections is a priority this week, right? So we set aside time for what's really important, and children can see what are important to parents. I mean, parents can say, oh yeah, man, you are my priority. But if the actions and conduct do not show on a consistent basis, even with disabilities for a child like me, I'm perceptive enough to observe and discern that. So the actions and the words must correspond. Not to mean you are perfect, because no one is perfect, but I'm talking about a general direction, and children can see that, right? So that's the first one. The next one is consolidation of values and perspectives. You see, it's not just the fact that I can go with my parents and complain and just cry out, cry foul every time. It's a fact that I know they stand for something, you see. They stand for something that is a bit very radical and uncommon at that point of time. where it's not about results alone, it's the way you attain the results, it's the way you respond to the bullying, it's the way you respond to adversity that makes all the difference to them. And they kept modeling that, even though I kept saying, what you're saying is crap, I don't believe in it. So they never back down on that. And it takes moral courage where you are actually, the parents can tell the child, do you know it's actually much braver to make a stand and call out things that are wrong? If something is wrong and somebody bullies you, it's wrong. Recognize and call a spade, as they say. If bullying is happening and you are a victim, call it out. Even if people want to make fun of you or that, hey, who has the courage to call out a bully and to expose the bully's actions to people? That is an act of bravery. Much braver than joining a group of people and bullying others in superiority in numbers. So actually, you should praise the child when the child has the courage to tell you, the child has the courage to tell the teacher, and the child has the courage to stand firm and not retaliate with hatred in the midst of all this adversity. It actually speaks a lot on the child's character. And you need to affirm the child in that, because the child will notice that this is something worth affirming. Number two, never entertain a lie that you can keep all these things to yourself, it's all okay, because most guys, especially in boys' school, right, say, oh, I'm the 男子汉, the guy with a lot of manliness. I do not share any tears. I do not share my weaknesses with people. That is a wrong perception of manhood. In fact, a true man knows when to cry and when to show their vulnerability. And being vulnerable enough to share one struggle and being able to overcome that struggle in spite of the difficulty, that is courage. And that is something to be affirmed also. So never let the lie that, oh, telling people about your problems and asking for help is a sign of weakness. It's not. It's a sign of strength. So you need to reorientate all these wrong notions and have an extreme makeover, so to speak, in all these wrong social pressures being used by people who do not want their actions to be exposed. Right? Number three is a team effort. You see, so in a family, it's always a team effort, right? You can't overcome bullying by yourself. The child can't do it by themselves. They have to work with the teachers have to work with the allied educators to work with counselors, and so on. So it's always going to be a team effort, and it may be a lifelong effort, because people like me, my disabilities are lifelong. They don't disappear magically just like that. Sure, I learned a way to cope with those and to manage, but the problems are inherent and never go away. So it must be a consistent effort in saying that we're there together with you, as long as your values and character you don't compromise. That's the bare essential, and then other things can be addressed and fall in their proper place, but get the fundamentals right first as a team. Finally, right, see, I can shift this up, okay, right, delegation as well as, let me move this way, sorry, resume share. Observation and delegation, can you see the screen? Yes, okay. So you must also realize that you can't do everything by yourself, right? So a lot of it, besides talking, is observing. So if you notice your child normally has a ritual of doing things or saying certain things, when you notice, like I mentioned, my students, when they're no longer interacting with their friends, it's a break from the usual pattern of behavior and rituals. Certain things they must do every day, suddenly they don't seem to have that enthusiasm anymore. They don't seem to have the same kind of interest, that same kind of hunger. Alarm bell should be ringing already. It's time to talk to the child and ask what's going on. And if they are not willing to talk, coax it out of them gradually by asking them and assuring them that you're there for them. So you must be alert to the signs, you see, because even in the area of humanities, right, where I teach history, social studies, and all that, observation of the evidence in front of you is the first way of inferring from the evidence what is the conclusion and the condition which the kid is in at the point of time. So you need to observe, right? And it's easy not to observe when we're so busy in Singapore with our respective work, but hey, our children are our priority, so we make time for that. Yeah. And number two, right? Social media, right? Wow, okay, this is my personal recommendation. Sometimes when I meet up with parents and all that, when the kids are not manageable, the first thing they do as an act of convenience is they dump an iPad on the kid and say, okay, go amuse yourself. And then they continue their conversations with the other adults. So the default mode the kid gets is, oh, whenever I'm facing a need from my parents, I need attention, I need certain things to share with them, I'll be dismissed by a quick fix. And the quick fix is an iPad or maybe an Android tablet. And after I engage myself, I'll be a bit entertained, but hey, the problems are still the same, right? So that's my default mode where I go to. Instead of going to my parents, I go to my iPad, I go to social media and so on. And social media is a very insidious platform where people can appear to be friends, and then they can turn it against you later on when they get personal information from you and use it against you. And that happens in schools, both for teachers and for students. I can tell you teachers are also victims of bullying online by students too. So the parents, when you refer to WhatsApp, be there to help to set their accounts first, set a certain age where they're allowed to have their own account, supervise it. There are tools of surveillance where you can actually regulate the content and survey what your kids are involved in. They will protest. They say, I need my privacy. Yes, privacy without supervision is disaster. There needs to be supervision so that later on they can be trusted with privacy later.
Matthew, finally, can just go to the third point.
Yes, the point. Finally, please do not be afraid to seek certified and reliable medical assistance. There are a lot more medical platforms and specialists today who can help children and victims of bullying. And because it affects mental health, right? These are areas that we are more conscious of nowadays. So never be ashamed of seeking medical professional help because they are part of the team effort. And if it's not addressed and nipped in the bud, it will germinate, grow, escalate, and later on the problem will be very much bigger. And if you seek help at that point of time, you have a much bigger problem at hand. So you must learn to be able to observe first and intervene when needed. But of course, the balance is needed also to give children their space. So it's a matter of wisdom, you see. You know when to intervene, when to give space, and you're not overbearing at the same time. Okay, I shall stop sharing.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Matthew. Okay, so basically what Matthew, to summarize, basically is to turn to families for support and also to provide children a safe space to communicate and also at the same time to allow supervision of the channels to ensure that children are in a safe environment so that they do not get bullied and they are protected from bullies. And most importantly, like what Matthew mentioned, because bullies they come in big groups. So that is why it's important that parents provide children the necessary courage and also the protection and support the children need to help them to fight off against bullies. Am I correct, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. But if the parents are not able to fulfill that role, those who are educators in this chat group also must realize that you have the power to change things as well. So be empowered in that if you are able to make a difference.
Okay, so Ken, I was just going to wrap up this session. So okay, I just want to just share some of the comments here from Regina. She said, I think this is the most challenging part of becoming a parent. Understanding and respecting the child has his or her own person with their own personalities, being perceptive enough to recognize that they may be facing a problem that they may not be able to handle without making them feel stifled or appearing to be hard of the parent. And also, Loretta also shared that as a very helpful anti-bullying intervention strategies. Thank you so much, Matthew, for sharing that. And also from Amy, Matt, thank you for being authentic to share your present experience and turning the unpleasant experience into informative and educative piece for us to take away. Okay, so Ken, so basically, we're just going to wrap up this discussion session. So before we end, so basically the main takeaways is to first, a good, strong family support network is essential. And next, also, we also need to provide children with an open communication and, like what we mentioned earlier on, a safe space for them to convey and to raise their concerns to parents or to their siblings as well. And also at the same time, the children must also be comfortable in sharing their experience of being bullied. And at the same time, everyone has a role to play when it comes to intervention, when it comes regards to bullying. Right, Matthew?
Yeah, and just add on to this thing. Every weakness can be turned into a strength if you respond correctly with the right perspective and with the right help. So
okay, Ken. All right, Ken. Thank you so much, Matthew, and thanks again for joining us as well. And thank you everyone for active participation in this discussion program. And thank you so much for taking time off. So to conclude this, we will end this discussion, and we hope that with this platform, we're able to raise the awareness of bullying and how parents and educators can come in to eradicate this silent treatment of bullying in school or even outside. Once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks for being with us.